her, but she's done some really cool things in her sobriety, and I think in 2 days you pick up 11. She picks up 11 years in 2 days. So with that, help me welcome Miriah.
Miriah, alcoholic.
Hey, Miriah.
Does this work?
Yeah, you can try
Yeah,
to pull it.
you can pull it on now.
I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm from Greensboro, so I'm about an hour and a half away. Like Clint was saying, we've known each other for a really long time. He's actually one of my brothers, really close. He's a really close friend of my brother and, my family in general. So when, I don't know, we got in contact over the summer and he asked if I was still in AA. And I was like, oh God, AA is my life, how do I explain that to somebody? What kind of question is that? But I didn't know what he was doing down here. I didn't know that he was doing a deal. So I was reassured when he started speaking that language. I said, oh, okay, he knows. And I did. I think that we watch our loved ones go through a lot of stuff because of this disease. But my sobriety date is the 17th. So Monday I'll have 11 years if I make it. I have a home group in Greensboro. It's Free Spirit. We meet on Saturday nights at 8 o'clock. So they're meeting right now. I ditched my home group to come here and speak. But it's a great group. We're a literature study right now. We're reading Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. It's a great group. I love that. I've gone to that home group since very early in my sobriety. It's a really safe place for me. There's a lot of old timers. They've watched me grow up. I got sober at a young age, and there weren't a lot of teenagers in AA. There were a lot of young 20-somethings, but there weren't a lot of teenagers. So I had a lot of people that looked out for me, But I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. But I'm going to tell you guys, I guess, in a general way, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I'm a little nervous, and when I get nervous, I get really blotchy, so don't call an ambulance. I'm fine. Sometimes also when I speak, everybody comes up, afterwards, and they're like, you did good, that kind of thing. And it's like, I'm fine. I just get nervous. But so I used to share my story, and I would say that I had a normal childhood. And now that I've gotten older, I've realized how that's not true. I grew up with an alcoholic mother, an addict alcoholic mother, and our house was extremely chaotic. I remember wanting to never leave my, friends' houses, that kind of thing, because they had parents that weren't, drinking every night and using substances and that kind of thing. And I have an older brother. He's about 17 months older than me, and we were always really close. But I remember most of my childhood I was really afraid. My parents would scream and argue, and I would hide in my brother's room, and he would, try and ignore everything that was happening, and I was an emotional wreck. Most of my childhood, I was just a disaster, and I remember people would, call me a brat and selfish and spoiled and things like that, because I would just have these emotional outbursts, and, and I'm just looking back on it now, I can see why I would have those emotional outbursts. One of the best things in AA is I get all these wonderful friends, and these friends have children, and I get to see them raise their children sober. And I get to see that, there's a different way to parent. There's a different way to love a child and be in a child's life. And, it wasn't until I saw that stuff, especially with my second sponsor. She had 2 children while we were working together, and I just got to see her raise these kids in this home that was just full of love and compassion and consistency. And I started to realize, okay, that's not what my house looked like, But up until that point, I just, you know, a lot of the stuff that happened when I was younger, I thought that maybe that's what everybody experienced, and, but I do know a lot of people do experience that. So I don't know, I guess around, towards the end of middle school, I started hanging out with older people that drank, and did other things, and I remember my first night drinking, my friend had stole, a lot of beer from the place she worked at, and it was warm, and, we went and drank in like the Walmart parking lot in Randleman, and we, you know, we fell asleep, and, there was some guy with us, he walked home, but me and her fell asleep in the car, and, you know, and it wasn't until the next weekend we somehow convinced these older guys to buy us liquor from the ABC store, and they ended up buying us like something fruity or something. I don't know. Like it had like a lot of sugar in it, and it was supposed to taste good. But I remember my friend made me a mixed drink, and I started chugging it, and I was like, I don't feel anything, you know. And this was this is my first drink, and I mean, all I remember was blacking out. I woke up the next morning, you know, and that's how I drank from that point on. There was never, I never stopped. You know, the way I drank was hard and fast, and it was, you know, I was destroying myself. I was a blackout drinker. You know, I started using other substances that helped with, you know, getting me to where I needed to be quicker, and you know, I was in a lot of pain up until, you know, that first drink, and when that happened, when I experienced that, which it talks about in the big book, it was, you know, that was the moment that, you know, I knew I was going to do this for the rest of my life. And me and my friends group, like, we talked about it all the time. You know, that's all we did. I snuck out of my house. I lied to my parents. I didn't go to class. One night I snuck out of my window, and I fell out of the window. And I hurt myself really bad. And my brother sticks his head out the window, and he's like, you could have just used the front door. Like, what are you doing? You know, because my parents are passed out. Like, they're not going to wake up. And I've just thrown myself out the window, and I'm like, I should have probably gone to the hospital, but, you know, alcohol numbs, that kind of stuff. But, you know, and that's just what I did. I lied to everybody in my life. I stole from all of my friends. I stole from stores. I used people, you know, like I would just go from one person to the next. And if they provided me liquor, like, we were good, you know. But as soon as I didn't have, you know, what I needed, that's when I would just lose it. You know, I would be violent. I would throw a fit. You know, I had to have something in me, you know, that was going to take me out of this world. And you know, every time I remember sobering up, you know, the few times I explicitly remember sobering up. One time I had like an infected lymph node, and my neck looked like it was broken. I had to go to the emergency room. That was really bad. But the other times, like, I just remember waking up and the amount of like emotional pain I was in from the stuff, like the way I was living, you know, the things that you have to do at 14 and 15 to drink like I did, are painful, you know. I mean, I had to invite all kinds of people into my life to provide for me in my habit, you know, and my family had given up. My brother, God bless him, he would come and get me from the sketchiest places. I would call him up, and I don't know how he would find me, but he always did. He always found me. And, you know, he would be cussing me out, yelling at me, you know, Miriah, why are you always doing this? And, like, I would be missing my shoes, and my shirt would be torn, and You know, I just, like, I was a disaster, and I didn't care. You know, I saw the pain on his face, and I just didn't care. You know, and watching my dad see me do that kind of stuff, you know, watching his little girl, and my brother watching his baby sister, you know, live that way. It was painful, but I had to do it, you know. We were just talking before the meeting. You know, I think sometimes people can get really confused about alcoholism, you know, and, you know, coming into the rooms at a young age, I didn't lose a car or a house or a wife or kids, you know, but I lost all dignity that I had, you know. I was a shell of a person when I walked in these rooms. I had nothing. I was no one, you know. I've been fighting my entire life to get away from the pain and the fear that I had been carrying around. And, you know, what makes me an alcoholic is this obsession and compulsion. When I wasn't drinking, I was obsessing about it. And when I did start drinking, I couldn't stop. And that's, I mean, that was every night. That was every day of my life, you know. So I ended up, my last big drunk was, we went out to see a band, and I ended up stealing pretty much all of my mother's prescription medication, which it wasn't prescribed, like it was in an Advil bottle, you know, prescription. She also is one of us. And, you know, and I ended up taking a lot of it, and I had no idea what happened. I have no idea. I know it's bad, but, you know, at this point in time, I was staying at this 27-year-old's house, and I'm 27 now, you know, and I see 14 and 15-year-olds, and I'm like, oh my God, those are children, you know, like, I thought I had experienced a lot, you know, at that age. I thought, you know, I was well seasoned, like, on these streets. And, I mean, that's not true. I had a lot to learn, you know. And I don't know how I didn't get killed. I don't know how I didn't die. But, you know, I was staying mostly with this 27-year-old man who provided for me. He would pick me up from high school and buy me Mad Dog 2020s, the blue kind. I was, you know, real expensive taste. And, you know, as long as I could stay drunk all the time, I was fine. You know, the moment I sobered up, I mean, I was fine. Everybody around me, like, I was ruining their lives, you know, and I was, like, breaking their furniture, lighting shit on fire, you know, stealing their stuff. But I was fine. You know, so finally, I don't know what happened, but my family, I guess, just had enough. And I thought it was really hypocritical because of the way they were living, you know, that I was the one that had to go to rehab. And, but I'm very grateful for that. You know, whatever pushed them to do that, it was God. You know, but that last night, I remember stole all my mom's medication, and I'd already been drinking for most of the day, and you know, I black out and wake up the next morning, and I somehow get to school. I have no idea how I got to school, but I remember like passing out in class and falling out of my chair, and then waking up and like having like a panic attack and running to see the therapist, who probably already like had, you know, their radar on me. And I started telling them what was going on, and then she started asking me about my drinking, so I left. You know, I said, no, my drinking's not the problem. My mother is the problem. You know, she's crazy. And so she started asking about my drinking. I said, you know, that's not important. Like, that's not the issue. But so I left there, and I got home, and it was kind of, I think my brother and my uncle were pushing, you know, Miriah needs help, and so they had like a little mini intervention, and I tried to run away, and I remember walking down the driveway, and my uncle was following me. He's like 300 pounds, he's huge, and and he was following me, and he was just yelling at me, you know, where are you gonna go? You don't have anything, you don't have any money, you know. And like, this is my uncle who like has been locked up for like crack cocaine, and you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, who are these people trying to tell me how to live my life? And you know, they're people that love me a lot. That's who they were. And you know, and finally I was just like, okay, you know, I'll come back. And I went and met with a counselor at a treatment center the next day, and he told me his story, and he was older. He's an older man, and it was the first time I'd ever heard my story, and I cried. I just sat there and bawled my eyes out, and I bawled my eyes out probably every meeting for the first year. There was so much relief in what you guys were telling me. You know, it was, I didn't realize the magnitude of, I think, what I was carrying around. And it took me a long time, I think, to really be able to let you guys in. And, you know, I had a sponsor, and she was really the only person I talked to when I first got sober. She had a husband, and her husband was awesome. Like, if any guys would come and talk to me, he would be like, what do you want? You know, like, he was amazing. He had my back no matter what. And, you know, because I was broken, you know. I think a lot of us end up in these rooms and we're broken, you know. It's hard for me to identify with people that, you know, come in and still think that, you know, what they've done, I don't know, what they've done is just, you know, that I still have some kind of control over this. You know, I proved that to myself. And when I came in here, the obsession to drink didn't go away. I know a lot of people that it did. You know, they came in, they surrendered, and that obsession was removed. But it wasn't until I got to the 10th step that I stopped obsessing about drinking. There was a lot of times when for months on end, anytime I was by myself, I was on my knees begging God to remove that obsession. And, you know, I had a really hard time too, I think, with the first step because of my age, you know, and the, I guess the amount of time, you know, I drank. And, you know, I think that, I remember one time my sponsor just yelled at me. She said, you know, it's an obsession and it's a compulsion. You know, like, it's not about all these consequences, you know. Like, I think that we share these consequences because that's how I relate, you know. But really, what I identify with is the fact that I couldn't quit thinking about it, no matter what I did. I could run on the treadmill for 15 miles, you know. I could do whatever. I could not quit thinking about a drink. And you know, and I proved myself that I couldn't stop. But so I went through treatment, and, you know, I learned what I think a lot of people learn in treatment. It was a long-term treatment center for young people, and I got out of treatment, and I'd worked up to the 4th step in the treatment center, and I got out of treatment, and I realized that I was in the real world, you know. I needed to get a job. I needed to find like a sober place to live. And, you know, granted, I was like a high school dropout, 16 years old. I got sent to treatment a week before my 16th birthday. And I kept on using some certain substances while I was in treatment for the first 30 days. But, which is why my sobriety date's in December, but my birthday's in November. You know, so I got out of this treatment center, and I realized how much I knew, how much I didn't know. You know, didn't know about recovery, didn't know about life in general. You know, I thought that I was this streetwise person, and nobody could tell me anything, and I learned that wasn't the case. You know, I met a lot of women that paved the way before me, and my sponsor I think she had about 6 years sober, my very first sponsor. And she had also gotten sober when she was 16. And she was very much about the big book, which, I mean, you know, that's where the program is in this book. But she said, Miriah, you need to call me every day. We need to meet every week. We need to read this book, and we're going to work through steps as we're reading through this book. And I texted her one day, and she yelled at me, and I never texted her again. I called her every day. I was terrified of her. She was like very loving, but also like very stern at the same time. You know, she said, if this is what you want, if you want what I have, this is what we're going to do. End of story. She kept it about the program. You know, it wasn't about her opinions. It wasn't about any advice. You know, it was about what's in this book. And that's how I sponsor today. And, you know, I keep this program between me and that sponsee, and it has never failed me. What's failed me is when I try and add my own personal opinion into whatever experience, strength, and hope I'm trying to share to this person, thinking that I know better than, you know, this book. So yeah, so I mean, I was miserable. When people tell me they're newly sober, I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? Because that was crazy. I was nuts. I mean, I was an emotional wreck. Like, if you looked at me, I cried. And then I would, like, you know, have these, like, crazy waves of, like, gratitude or, you know, sadness. And I would go to these meetings and I would be so embarrassed because I'd be, like, the person in the corner crying, but, like, not normal crying, like snot running down my nose, kind of crying. And, you know, and that eventually leveled off. My emotions have leveled off. You know, but what I didn't realize was there was so much bottled up in me. Like, I mean, just, I think about what that felt like today, and I'm just like, oh, that's, oh, I don't know. So we started working through the steps, and we worked through, you know, that 4th step, and you know, she helped me identify as an alcoholic. She did. She taught me about alcoholism. You know, we read the doctor's opinion, and I related to a lot in that. And we read Bill's story, and then we went and we read Dr. Bob's Nightmare. And I don't understand why Bill's story's in the front and Dr. Bob's isn't, but you know, I related to Dr. Bob's Nightmare a lot more than Bill's story. You know, I related to the strenuous work with other alcoholics every day, you know, because that's what I was having to do. I got my license at about 30 days sober. You know, I had done driver's ed and stuff like that the year prior. And then I was 16 and my mom said that, you know, I couldn't get my license until I got 30 days, which I was really upset about. Thought that was a little ridiculous, you know. I needed to get to meetings. And I had no job and I wasn't in school or anything like that. It wasn't ridiculous. Why did she even let me get my license at 30 days sober? I would never do that if I was her. But the good thing is I drove people to meetings. A lot of my friends didn't have a car, and I did. And it was a 99 Toyota Corolla. It was a manual, and I was angry because I didn't know how to drive manual, so I had to learn. And but I drove people to meetings. That's all I did. You know, we would like load like 5 people in the back seat, and we go to meetings. And you know, those are some of the best memories I have in recovery, because we were all just, I mean, we were new and we were just trying to live, you know. They talk about that pink cloud, which I don't know if that's what it was or not. It was just, for the first time in my life, I had people that I identified with, and people that had wanted to die as much as I did, you know, and people that had done the same kind of things that I had done. You know, we started to be able to have this open dialogue about all these awful things, you know, like I've never met people that I can, sometimes I meet people, out in the world and we become friends, and then they get to know me, and I start telling them about myself and they get silent. Like, oh, I shared too much, my bad. Ignore that. But I can come in here and I can tell you guys all that stuff and you guys just laugh. So me and my sponsor worked through the steps, and we did 2 and 3. My understanding of God was none. I still don't understand God, right? I have a relationship with a higher power, but I don't understand it. I wish I did. I know that my higher power loves me a lot and is going to take care of me, which I didn't believe for a long time, for years in this program. But what I did believe was what this book told me. And so we talked about 2, we talked about 3, we did the third step prayer, we held hands on our knees, it was weird. And then we went on to the 4th step. She said step 3's, do you agree with what step 3's talking about? And and she explained to me that step 3 was, really just moving on with the rest of the steps. And I said, okay, let's do this inventory. And I wrote my inventory, and, I wrote down all those things that I had never told anybody. And I was so afraid to write it down because what if somebody found it? And I started reading that inventory to her, and she started crying. I said, why are you crying? This is about me. And it was because she had gone through the same, like her story was my story, and she had shared so many things with me by that point in time that I knew I could trust her with my stuff. I knew I could tell her the deep, dark, monsters of my past, and because she had been so open with me. And, she said, all right, 5th step's over, go home, read, the part in the big book after that talks about the 5th step, and pull your book down off the shelf, and have that hour with God, and if you're ready, move on to 6 and 7. Okay, I'm ready. And, and she had me doing the 7th step prayer every day, and I kind of understood defects. There was a lot of glaring ones in the beginning that I think I was immediately ready for God to take. Please help me stop stealing and lying and whatever else. And then when I got to 8 and 9, I decided to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, and go to college. And I took it kind of as like a chance to get away from, or get out of having to make amends. I was in a different city now. I was in college. I didn't have time to make these amends. And because of that, I almost drank, and I think that's, I see it a lot, and I've experienced it. If I don't work these steps, I'm convinced I'll drink again. And I started on the amends process, so we had done 10, 11, 12, and I was talking a lot in meetings. I was saying a lot of things, thinking I knew some stuff, and I didn't know much still, and I didn't quite grasp the humility part. So I moved back to Greensboro. I transferred. Charlotte's not for me. I transferred to a college in Greensboro, and like I said, I hadn't went out and made those amends. And the amends that I had made were basically me showing up to these friends that I had screwed over, just to show them how well I was doing. And I think there's a lot of humility, that comes with step 9, and I just didn't have it. I didn't understand. I thought that I still had some kind of control over my life, and you know, I think that what always pushes me to grow is just a lot of pain. You know, that's always been a constant in my life. You know, I don't do stuff, I get in pain, and it's, you know, you get back to that decision of, am I gonna, you know, take this spiritual solution, or am I gonna drink? You know, because whenever I'm working backwards, that thought of a drink, it'll come back in my head, you know. So I mean, I remember being in so much pain, and I would leave class and I would get on my knees in the bathroom stalls, and I would ask God to help me, you know. I would beg God to help me. I would beg God to help me remember, you know, the pain of drinking, and, you know, help me have this willingness to make these amends, and God did. He reminded me of that pain. You know, I don't know why anybody would ever pray for pain, but I thought it was a good idea. And, you know, and I was in a lot of pain, and I remember, I had planned to drink one night, and it was actually with one of me and Clint's friends, but, cause I knew I could manipulate him into buying me alcohol, cause I still wasn't 21. And a good friend of mine called me, and she needed a ride to a meeting. And I got to the meeting, and I was putting up chairs. You know, you guys, they tell us, put up chairs, make coffee, whatever, sweep the floor, you know, do that kind of stuff. And I was putting up chairs, and this guy had picked up 30 days, and I congratulated him. And, you know, all this time I'm like planning on going to drink, you know, like, let me get out of this meeting so I can drink. And this guy looks me dead in the eye, and he had picked up his 30-day chip, and he said, I have been trying to get back in these rooms for 15 years, and I can't. And I said, thank you, God. You know, and I think about that moment all the time, because I needed to hear that. And over the next couple days, I made those amends. I said, you know what, Miriah, this isn't worth it. It's not worth dying over. I made the amends. I got on Facebook, and I started getting people's contact information, and it was right this time. I went to these people, and I was truly sorry, you know, and I asked them, how can I make this better? And you know, my sponsor was, of course, like, oh, finally, great job, you know, you did what you're supposed to do. And, you know, things got better. You know, my life is really great today. You know, I touched on God, you know, my relationship with God, and I spent a long time in these rooms thinking that God might love you guys, but he doesn't love me. And you know, because of these 12 steps, I have a relationship with God that I truly believe wants me to be healthy, wants me to be sober, wants me to live. And for a long time, I was convinced otherwise, and there's been a huge amount of relief that comes with that relationship with a higher power. I think that I just had chronic anxiety over the fact that I was just only depending on me for so many years. And, you know, the point of these steps is to get us to a God that's going to remove that obsession. And in order to do that, I got to work these steps. I got to get to God. And there's a lot of work that comes before that. And, you know, I was listening to a speaker, and they were making that joke about we're the only people on this planet where it's like we'd rather die than accept spiritual help, you know, and we see it all the time, and it's like a simple question, but I mean, there's been times when, you know, no, I'd rather choose that, you know, I'd rather choose alcohol over it, you know, and I have a lot of, my network in AA is amazing. I like that I can come down here and see you guys. I came to a meeting in here in August. I think it was a good meeting, but you know, and I sponsor women. I have 3 sponsees, and we're all on this like 4th, 5th step. We're all doing it together. I mean, not together, but like we're all just on it. Like, I don't know how it works out that way, but my sponsor suggested that I do another 4th step. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever, sponsor. And he's amazing. He has 26 years, and he's been in my sobriety my entire, like, he's known me since I was, you know, a kid. And, you know, we just started working together over the summer. My old sponsor, which I had been working with her for 7 years, moved, and I thought my world was gonna end because I had to get a new sponsor. You know, I loved this woman more than anything. And I was a mess. I was going to meetings and crying and telling everybody about how I don't have a sponsor anymore. And, you know, and they were like, get it together, you know. Ask somebody. And, you know, so I did. I ended up asking Philip, and it's been amazing. You know, he's really taught me how to sponsor. He's taught me what a dedicated sponsor looks like. You know, he takes this program so seriously at 26 years sober, and it's just, I mean, it's lit a fire under me. And, you know, I have these 3 sponsees that they call me, and they tell me about them, and, you know, I'm showing them, you know, how to work these steps in the book, and we meet once a week. And you know, they make this joke that they always say that whenever they call me, I tell them to pray, which I think is hilarious, because that's just not who I am, or who I was. That's not who I was. I would have never, you know, I'm the type of person, you call me and you're in a bad mood and, you know, want to like just complain, I'll complain with you, you know. But here recently, it's just, a lot has changed for me, and I needed to do these steps again. And my sponsor had me go all the way back with this last sex inventory. And it was so good for me, because I was looking at that stuff when I was a kid still, you know. Now I'm looking at that from the eyes of a 27-year-old woman, you know. Like, I needed to go all the way back, and, you know, for whatever reason, he suggested that. And it's been so great. I've made so many friends, you know. In this last year, I was really isolated from AA for several years. I got in this relationship and moved out to the middle of nowhere, and then I got engaged, and I thought it was a good idea. It was not a good idea. You know, so that ended about 2 years ago, and I came running back to AA. You know, I was still going to meetings, but it was not a priority. And these last 2 years, being back in Greensboro and sponsoring and being active, you know, really being here, and that's been amazing. You know, and it's because of the program, you know. Like, everything I have in my life today is because of this program. I finished undergrad in 2014. I played on a collegiate sports team and like traveled the country with them, and I never played sports until college. I didn't know I was sporty. I'm not actually that sporty. I don't know how they let me on that team. But you know, I lived in a dorm. You know, I'm in grad school now. I'm working full time. I'm in grad school at night. You know, and I've been able to travel. I lived in Europe for a little while, and you know, all these things are just insane. Like, they just keep coming, you know. And I think my part is just show up, you know, show up and do the work. You know, and when I don't know what to do, I ask God. And that's what I do. When I don't ask God, that's when I screw things up. And then I'll go running to God in a lot of pain. You know, why'd you do this to me, God? And you know, I'm very grateful for the life I have today. I think that sometimes I forget. You know, with my birthday coming up, I get really like reflective on what it used to be like, and you know, so much has changed, and it's because of this program. You know, I've had to look at some hard stuff, but it's nothing that killed me. You know, I used to think that it would be too painful to look at some of the stuff, but it doesn't compare to the pain that I experienced when I was drinking. You know, and I can show up for my family today, and I can show up for my friends and my responsibilities, and you know, I don't think there's anything that I love more than you guys, you know, in this fellowship, and just being around it, even when times are tough, because, you know, life still happens, you know, we still have things that we deal with, and sick family members. I'm going to see my aunt tomorrow, who's real sick, and, you know, that stuff, it's sad, but I'm grateful that I can show up for her, and, but I think that I've talked for long enough. I was hoping Clint would talk longer in the beginning. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks.